When it launched in 1980, the Metro was British Leyland's British car to beat the world. And for the first few years, it was very successful indeed. But come the end of the 1980s, it was getting out of date in the face of increasingly fraught competition. So Rover had another go and came up with the Rover Metro of 1990 with the K-series engine, suspension revisions and just little tweaks.
So we thought we'd chart the life and times of the Metro, starting with this very early 3,000-mile Metro City and then driving this rather late high-spec Metro GSI to see how the model evolved and indeed whether it was still worth buying in the late 90s. But first, our friends at Lancaster Insurance are running monthly giveaways. You can win all sorts, from experience days to tools, restaurant vouchers and tech. So click the link below at the end of the video to enter their latest competition.
So welcome to the A-series original shape Austin Metro. Well, actually this is a Mark II, so this is a 1984 on car, but the most basic we could possibly find.
Absolutely is. It's a city and it is so basic. Don't even get a glove box lid. Basic vents that don't close, big plastic blanking plug where your radio would be if you'd worked harder at school.
Yeah.
Even plastic blanking plugs for where your headrest would be if you got those.
And they were only moulded plastic headrests anyway. We're not even entitled to those.
No, you just didn't work hard enough at school, Jeff. Sorry about that.
You could have had a City X if you'd sat those maths exams.
But nonetheless, in its most base form, we can still appreciate the Metro as BL intended. And they had grand plans for it from day one, didn't they?
Yes, I mean, BL had several attempts at replacing the Mini. Things sort of kicked off in the early 70s with the ADO74, and then they moved on to the ADO88. They put it in front of the public, and the public reception wasn't particularly good. So a new team, led by David Batt, they came up with the LC8, which was a hastily restyled version. And it basically all happened in 5 weeks.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
5 weeks from concept to a production-ready design.
And that's what emerged in 1980 as the British car to beat the world. And of course, the basic ingredients weren't really new. Different ideas for an engine were trialled, but the A-series is still torquey and still economical.
Well proven.
So they came up with the A+ version, which also eventually found its way in the Mini. The suspension was the Hydragas from the Allegro, very compact for the dimensions they were trying to achieve. Still had subframes, just like the Mini, separate subframes. It was all very simple, but it was put together quite cleverly on a very small budget. BL was government owned by that point. They took a lot of their money from other projects to put it into the Metro, but really, I mean, compared to the might of Ford, it was still a shoestring.
A paltry budget.
Yeah.
And it was clever use of existing technology in some of the best British Leyland fashions. Take that Hydragas suspension. It worked on the Allegro in kind of a mid-sized car to give that a lot of comfort.
The Hydragas was devised to be connected front to rear, but it wasn't on this. It was connected side to side. But that was a compromise straight away, it's basically to save money. But, you know, it does ride well, doesn't it?
It rides very well. For such a little car, we're not jostling around. It's genuinely really smooth. What we're in here is a very, very mint example of a Metro. It's done 3,250 miles. You'll forgive us for not absolutely caning it down here, but
it feels like a Mini in many ways. You've not got the spring-loaded gearbox, you know, you're across for third. The Mini at the time, when it was launched in 1980, still had all-round drum brakes. The Metro got 4-pot calipers from the off.
Wow.
It did have some very impressive features, and it was quite roomy. The boot's remarkably big for a Super Mini. You had the folding rear seat. This one doesn't have the folding rear seat, but it does have the rear doors, which came in from 84 onwards, option of a 5-door. And let's not forget that when the car was launched in 1980, it was a big success. BL really pinned its hope on the Mini Metro as it was launched, pruned the Mini range down, the Clubman was lost, the Clubman estate was lost. The Metro had to succeed, and initially it really did. It was the best-selling British Super Mini in 1983. It did really well. And actually, by that point, of course, you had the MG version as well.
Yeah, of course.
Launched in 1982, May 1982.
A little bit of sporting appeal.
Yeah, bringing back the Octagon, and of course then you had the Turbo.
Whoa.
It was the 80s after all.
Proper hot hatch there, body kit, turbo, big graphics.
Yeah.
That is a properly cool car, but that's a story for another day. Even as a base car here today, the Metro, actually, you can see it as a sort of credible step up from a Mini in many ways. There's a bit more space here. With the rear doors, you can genuinely get 4 adults in it. You can get a decent set of shopping in it. It's a bit more spacious, it's a bit more comfortable. Yeah. If you're just looking for another step up the ladder from the Mini, I think the Metro is brilliant for it.
It is more grown up than the Mini. It's not quite as chuckable.
Slightly bigger car though.
But it's still fun, and you can see that Mini DNA in it. It's very easy to fall in love with this.
It's
endearing.
cheeky, isn't it?
It is. It's an endearing little car, not exactly class leading. It wasn't class leading by the mid-80s. I mean, you think what was coming out, that
Peugeot 205.
yeah, the Uno left the Metro in their wake, but it doesn't matter now, does it?
It doesn't. It's a great fun little classic today. It was plagued though from early days, wasn't it? The unreliability, rust was a huge issue for these cars.
Yes, I mean, wings were going in 4 years.
Which frankly is unacceptable. Anyone of roughly this era will regale all sorts of stories of Metros with Hydragas sagging and leaning over to one side and every panel being rusty, and these being, by the 90s, worthless second-hand cars. And you can understand why this was kind of part of BL and then obviously Austin Rover's reputation turning downhill.
Absolutely can. I mean, I don't have a bad word to say about the Metro.
The Metro apologist.
I am a Metro apologist, and I make no apologies for it. No, I was growing up, these were everywhere.
It had a very good spread when you think about it, because you had everything from this real base city, the plush Van der Plas version, you had the hot turbo and the MG, but also there were the cheaper ones, like you say, your Clubmans in your cities, and they were everyone's first cars. People learned to drive in them. They were all things to all people.
The trouble is, by the time we got to the late 80s, you could only have a 4-speed box. Even the hot versions only had a 4-speed box. Rover had to do something, and they did have a plan. In the background, they were working on the AR6. The K-Series was destined to be under the bonnet, but then Austin Rover was government owned. It was up for sale when Graham Day came in. His instructions were to get the company sold.
So the company was reforming, money was tight, and all these grandiose plans for an ultra-modern, sharp success as the Metro. What did we actually end up with?
Well, we ended up with the R6. And we'll drive that next to just find out how well they did.
Well, we've gone up in the world, Jeff. I've got a glove box lid, I've got a headrest. We're in luxury.
Got some plastic wood.
Indeed. So, welcome to the R6, the Rover Metro.
The Rover Metro, yes, which made its debut in 1990.
An attempt to bring that 80s design into the 90s for the modern day. And in some ways successful, in other ways not. So talk to me about the major change, the engine.
Well, the major change, yes, the K-Series engine under the bonnet, so that required a thorough re-engineering of the front end, because of course the K-Series is an end-on gearbox engine rather than the A-Series, which has the gearbox in the sump. So it's a slightly longer front end. But the bonus to that, it meant they could adjust the cabin a little bit, give you a bit more foot space, and tilt the steering wheel down a little bit, so you don't quite have the bus driver angle of the original Metro.
No, you
can see it's lower.
You're driving more like a normal car, and it does feel more spacious in here. I've got more dash to play with. But what I like is they've obviously reshaped the interior, but they've kept the Metro familiarity. You've still got that pod with all the gauges in it and the switches to hand. You've still got this nice little shelf here.
Plusher, isn't it? And it just smoothed off.
It's more rounded, it's more modern.
It was a funny car, the Rover Metro, because obviously they had the grand plans with the AR6, and then when it was time to cut costs, they had to use the original Metro body shell largely. And there were plans to think about ditching the Hydragas until Michael Edwards drove Alex Moulton's properly front to rear connected Austin Metro. Thought it was a revelation, told Graham Day, hang on, this is what we need to do, and that's what happened. The ride and handling of the Rover Metro was as good, if not better, than many of its contemporaries.
I'd agree with that. I think the ride, is more, it's a tiny bit firmer, but it's more composed, you know? There's not quite the floatiness, and even if you just flick it around now, the body control is really good. Suddenly you get into that 90s era, it's a bit more mature, it's a bit more refined.
Well, it's got a multi-valve engine.
It's got a multi-valve engine.
You could have an 8-valve K-Series, of course, and you could have the 16-valve.
By having that more modern K-Series engine, suddenly you got just as good, if not better, performance than the MG Metros of back in the day. You got more fuel economy, more refinement. It's a smooth engine, the K-Series.
I mean, obviously it's got that reputation for overheating problems, but the smaller ones generally tend to fare okay.
Yeah, it's surprisingly torquey, isn't it? It actually pulls along well, even with this little
automatic this is 1.4, isn't it?
It's surprisingly willing, isn't it? It's quite brisk. Yeah. But like you say, it's more composed. There's not quite as much body roll as in the A-Series car.
I think you could throw this down a country lane with a bit more confidence than you could the A-Series one.
Yeah, definitely. It feels grippy, but equally it hasn't lost that lovely Hydragas ride.
No, it is
This
nice.
is really comfortable, even though there's humpback bridge here.
What humpback bridge, sir?
Yeah, it's fine.
This is a Rover Metro, don't you know?
Very comfortable with real wood.
These were roundly praised by the press when they came out. It was a quantum leap forward. The upgrades that Rover made, let's face it, Rover were very good at working with very little money.
Absolutely.
I think I remember reading an old magazine article where they didn't even bother comparing it to the Fiesta because they thought it was that far ahead.
Really?
Yes.
You wouldn't imagine that nowadays, would you?
And after that initial 1990 boost, things again, a bit like with the Austin Metro, started to tail off as you got into the 90s. Rover then thought, we'll try and boost it again, and for a UK facelift, they came up with a Rover 100 in 1994.
And that really was desperate. You look at the Rover Metro compared to the Austin Metro, I think this is a genuine step up. I think it feels more modern, it's more spacious, the K-Series engine is an improvement in many ways, arguably handles better. This is a genuinely better car, and it doesn't just feel like reheated leftovers. I mean, you can't blame Rover for their situation. They had no money, no time, and the competition was closing in fast.
Yes.
But the 100 is really a desperate last attempt.
You have to feel the writing was on the wall, and of course...
It was very much on the wall when Euro NCAP crashed it into one.
Yes.
And it absolutely...
It literally hit a wall, didn't it?
And so too did its reputation, because at the time it was the worst result they'd ever had in a crash test. It basically highlighted quite how dated this platform was, and from that point on, no one wanted to be seen dead, or they probably would be, in a Metro.
That was the end.
And
that's
a
a
real
shame.
It is a shame.
Because it was outlived by the very car it was meant to replace.
Yeah, which in many ways, the dear old Mini was a more dated car right up to the end.
Well, yes, but the Mini had quite a lot of investment in 1996 to bring out the MPI models, whereas the Rover 100, unfortunately, was just left to wither.
To get slightly philosophical, Jeff, they do say that the star that shines twice as bright lives half as long. And you know what? I'm sure as a Mini-man you're not going to agree that the Metro shines brighter.
Absolutely not.
But it's a really credible little car, and this later Rover version shows there was life in the old dog yet.
Absolutely. Just don't crash one.
No.
This video is proudly sponsored by Lancaster Insurance. Give them a call on 01480 400 889 for an insurance quote on your classic car. And don't forget to click the link below to enter their latest competition.